Thank you. Um, it's nice to be called Mrs. once in a while. I think if everyone calls me Dr. Sindi, I've even forgotten that I'm a Mrs. No, but and I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to this talk. And I think what I'll try and do, I'll try and incorporate my experience with depression, and then obviously rope in the workplace and all of that stuff, because a lot of my depression, I think when I look back, a lot of it started, in the workplace. So I'm a very passionate person. I'm very passionate about everything that I do. As you know, I'm a medical doctor, and I'm a GP with a special interest in HIV. And what happens with people like me, type A personalities, as it were, is that we don't know when to stop, right? So we always want to help, always want to do the most. We never know when to stop and actually look after ourselves. And there are people that know when to stop and to look after themselves. There are people that know that, okay, I'm going home now. I must leave my work at work. And when I get home, I must now focus on my family and help my family. But people like me just don't have that off button, right? So what happens is that, I became a doctor. I was really gung-ho about the work, really got my, my heart and my passion into it. I always wanted to be a doctor. There was nothing else I wanted to do. So I suppose after 7 years, of just being in it, my body eventually gave up. And the symptoms and signs leading up to my mental breakdown, it was so clear what was happening with me. I think I knew, because after a while I Googled the symptoms and I remembered some symptoms from the psychiatric block, and I knew that I was depressed. But it was very difficult for the people around me to accept that I was depressed. Why? Because I was always happy, I'm always cheerful, and I'm always, I'm always the life of the party. And the more I said, guys, I think I have clinical depression, the more I was told, you're being a drama queen, you're just being your usual self, you'll be fine, you'll bounce back tomorrow. And that's one of the challenges of always being the strong one, is that when you eventually fall, the people around you don't actually know what to do. They're so used to this person that's like, I'll admit it, I know everything about everything. So if you need something and you ask me, within an hour, I'll have an answer for you. That's just the person that I am. And I think it's a gift from God. I don't even know why I'm like this. My dad is also the same. That's just how I am. But in 2013, when I eventually had my breakdown and I was admitted into hospital, and when you're admitted into a mental hospital, everything comes to a standstill. Like, you don't have your phone. The one that I went to, you only got your phone for 2 hours a day. You're on medication, you're doing OT, you're doing art, you're doing therapy sessions. You are so cut off from your world. You have no option but to face up to your issues. So one of the first things I had to face up to was that I was always trying to save the world. Yes, I'd always wanted to be a medical doctor. And yes, my dream had finally come true. But the truth of the matter was, I couldn't save the world. So I'd sit in therapy with a psychologist, and I'd cry. I was like, what do you mean I can't save the world? But that's why I became a doctor, to help people. And she'd say to me, yes, it's okay to do that, but you need a limit, right? You can't help everyone. And the one thing that she taught me was that I needed to look at my life and think to myself, okay, this patient sitting in front of me, I'm going to give that patient my all. And when that patient leaves the room, then that patient has left the room. What happens thereafter is between that patient and God, right? In the past, if a patient needed something, I'd take the patient's number, phone them, check that they're fine, check that they got their medication, check that they've done everything that they need to do. And you can't do that. It's great to have a doctor like that, but someone is suffering in that situation. And in my case, I was the one that was slowly getting depleted of my energy, right? So she taught me to deal with one person at a time, and once the person leaves the room, that's it. That's the relationship with me and that person done until the next time that I see them, right? The second thing that she forced me to do, forced me to agree to doing, and then as we carried on the therapy, I had to report back on that. She used to force me to leave my laptop in the car. So she said to me, when you get home, you get out of your car and you leave your laptop in your boot, or even better, leave your laptop at work. So at the beginning, I could not leave my laptop at work. That anxiety was too much for me. I'd have heart palpitations. I'd be very anxious if I don't check my emails, what's going to happen. But eventually it got better and better, to the extent that I was able to leave my laptop at work. I'd put it in a cupboard, especially on a Friday. I'd put my laptop in a cupboard, and as I left the office, I'd say to myself, you know what? It's done. I've done my best for this week, and now I'm going to go home and spend time with my family. And again, for a person that's like, a type A personality, it's so hard to unlearn the things that you've always done. If you're a high achiever like I am, you don't become a high achiever by accident. It's because you're either always reading or always doing something, right? And then you eventually get into school, you get a bursary, you go to a private school, then you get into medicine and you become a doctor because you're a high achiever. But there's a price to pay if you don't have boundaries. So the third thing that Dr. Marilise taught me was the issue of boundaries, right? You can help people, but you can't help everyone. And the biggest thing that I couldn't do in my life before the breakdown was to say no. And by not saying no, there's a doctor when I was an intern at Barra. So I was very hard working at Barra. And this doctor was asked by one of the other doctors, why do you pile so much work on Sindi? I've seen how you deal with all the interns, but you're particularly harsh with her, and you just keep on giving her the work. And he said to that doctor, because the doctor came and told me, and he said that because I know the job is going to get done. Sindi will not leave the hospital until she's done everything on that list. Whether she gets home at 10 p.m. or at midnight, however tired she is, she will do everything that I've put on the list. That's the first thing. And then he went on to say, she's like a donkey, right? And you know how donkeys are? You can burden them and they'll still carry on walking. So he told this doctor that I was like a donkey. No matter how much you put on me, I carried on walking. Even if I only had 3 legs, I'd carry on walking. And that's it. And I wasn't even offended, because you know what? That's exactly how I was. And so when I shared this with my psychologist, she said to me, you don't want to be a donkey, because other people are not being donkeys. I'm sure you have people in your circles who are living the life. They go to work, they go home, they shut off, and they have the time of their lives. And when now you're busy, they're crying, worried about patients, checking who's done what, phoning the hospital and checking if a patient's been discharged or not. And she said to me, you're robbing yourself and your family of a normal life. And so therapy was such a freeing time for me, in the sense that he was a stranger telling me all the faults in my life. Because the people around you, the people that are close to you, because they're so used to how you are, they can't tell you to be different, because this is all they've known. And even if there's something wrong, you're not going to start to, how do you say to me, Sindi, I think you work too hard. Like, what do you mean I work too hard? I'm a doctor. What do you expect me to do, right? So she was able to word things in a way that I could then look at myself as if I was in a drone, and look at my life and see, good time, man, this woman's actually right. There's a definite imbalance. Yes, I'm passionate. I'm good at what I do, and I want to be the best at what I do, but there's something missing. The next thing I had to incorporate into my life was self-care time. Now, that was a challenge. So I had to talk to my bosses at the place where I worked, and I asked them, she told me to ask them if Wednesday could be half day, and on that day I go out and I do my nails, or I go and I sleep, but I have to do something which is not related to work. And obviously I took a salary cut for that, but that self-care Wednesday, I actually started looking forward to it. At the beginning it was very strange, like, oh my gosh, like I don't even do my nails. Okay, let's do nails. And the following week, what am I going to do? It's so tempting to not do it, but people at work would remind me, it's Wednesday, you have to leave the office, and you must leave your laptop, in the office. And so as time went on, I got better and better at self-care. And I think a lot of the times that I did those Wednesday self-cares, it was just me looking at my life and just accepting that I had to be different. Accepting that old Sindi that I was couldn't exist anymore, because I'd had this catastrophe, I'd been admitted with depression, I'd had a mental breakdown, and I needed to be a different person for the sake of my kids. Because, when the kids are young, you have to create memories for them. So my mom, I come from a single parent home, and my mom had the most amazing childhood. She created so many memories for me. She did everything with me, by the way. Wherever she went, I was there. She'd tell people, I have one child, she's my handbag. You invite me to a party, my child's coming. She can't come, I'm not coming. Done. So I went everywhere with my mom, right? And it was a lot of fun. Sometimes it wasn't fun, but most times it was fun. But here I was, and because of my depression that had taken a few years to lead in, and now I was down in this valley of depression. I was there for about 4.5 years. I couldn't do stuff with my kids. I couldn't do anything with my kids. So my husband used to do everything. My husband's a great man. He did everything with my kids. So for the longest time, I was there. I was in the house, but I was always sleeping. If I was not sleeping, I was just, trying to just, do things that are self-care things, but not so much because I was still getting better. So my kids, for 4.5 years, they didn't have a mommy, right? And it didn't help either that because of the stigma that black people associate with mental illness, my mom struggled to accept that her only child, the apple of her eye, her golden egg, was living with depression. So when she came to see me at the mental hospital, she kept asking me what I was lacking in my life to have ended up depressed. And I had to explain to her that, Mama, you know what, I hear what you're saying. Yes, I'm married, and I'm married to a wonderful man. I've got 2 beautiful kids, and I've got a great job, and my dream has come true. I'm a doctor and all of those things. But I'm depressed. And she couldn't understand what had gone wrong for me to end up in a mental institution. Because she was just like, Sindi, you could see in her face that she was heartbroken. And 7 weeks after I was admitted, she died. So my mom died, and that was something else. So depression is one thing to deal with, and grief is something else. So I had 2 monsters to deal with at the same time. But the way God is so gracious, I always say to people, had my mom died before I had the breakdown, before I was on medication, I don't think I'd have coped with her death. I can look back now, I can see it clearly that had she died without me having had a breakdown, I wouldn't have made it. I wouldn't be here today. I'd have probably committed suicide. But God was gracious enough to allow the breakdown to happen, to make sure that when she does pass away, the antidepressants are kicking in, and the mood stabilizers are kicking in. Everything is kicking in. I've learned coping mechanisms, and that's the only way I was able to get through what is probably the worst nightmare in my life. Losing a mom, well, certainly for me as an only child, losing my mom was a nightmare. I can't articulate it, but I made it because I was already on medication. So you can imagine, yeah. So there are these 2 little kids growing up in this house where they've got a mom that they see, but she's not really present, but they've got a dad who's really present. So my husband has been so gracious in the last few years in terms of just bringing up my kids and making sure their lives carry on. And you become very unreliable when you are living with depression, because remember, I was still part of the yes brigade. Everything is yes, 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 yes. But now I'm still saying yes, but my body's saying no. So you'd phone me on a Friday and say to me, Sins, we're going to a wedding tomorrow, are you coming? And I'd say yes. I'd wake up on Saturday morning and I would not feel like going to the wedding. And I wouldn't go. So after a while, people stop trusting you because, they ask you to do stuff and you don't do it. But because I hadn't reached a stage where I was able to say, no, I cannot do that because I don't feel like doing it. I always felt I needed an excuse to say no because everyone knew me as the yes person. And my psychologist was like, no, you don't need an excuse to say no. Just say no. No is a complete sentence. So fine, I'd learn. I started learning to say no. And obviously at the beginning, people are like, hi, Bo. And then, what's wrong with you? But after a while, people realize it's okay, no, she's changing and she's evolving. And this is the new Sindi we're going to have to get used to. And I remember once my daughter was gossiping about me to my son. I could hear them. They were out at the door and they wanted something from me. So my son says, go in and ask her. And my daughter says, you know how she is. She's going to say no. And my son's like, no, let's try. I really want this thing, So they come in. And in my heart, I was like, let me surprise them. So they come in, and my daughter's like, Mom, because she knows I'm going to say no, right? Moni and I want to do it. But Yabona and Jay, she's asking that like, this one, we know the story. So I look up, I'm like, okay. And she was so shocked. She was like, huh? And Moni's like, I told you, But I started surprising them more and more. I started like being more present, being more adventurous, doing stuff. I swam with them. My kids didn't know I could swim. I've been able to swim since I was in grade 1. But because they had this mommy that was either working too much, never at home, and then depressed and grieving her mom, they just didn't know I could swim. So I'm like, okay. So I said to my husband, okay, let's go to Sun City. I I'll show these kids that I can swim. I'd swum with them before in December, then January we went to Sun City. I'd swum with them before, but Bobo and Jagu, they were like not convinced. They're like, I know, this one's like, she's paddling around a bit, but we'll see, let's go to a bigger pool. So I said to Happy, let's go to Sun City. Went and I bought a costume, get to Sun City, I get into the water, and I swim. And these two kids are flabbergasted that their mommy can swim. But can you see how debilitating mental illness can be? So the spectrum goes from working too hard, burning out, getting depressed, and then crashing. And the whole time there's a family that's suffering because of that. Right? When I was working too hard, I was hardly there. Then I crashed, and I was still hardly there. Then I was recovering, and I wasn't there. But finally, I'm back. Right? I'm back. And, for those of you that follow me on social media, and I feel sorry for you guys that have just only started following me, because you've missed out a lot of who I really am. And you'll have to go back to my 2011 tweets. But I've always been like this. The thing that you're seeing now, I've always been like this. It's just that I had a 5-year break. My mom's death and the depression all happened at the same time, and it took me a long time to get over that hurdle. And now I'm back. So if you think to yourself, oh, she's so dramatic, oh, she's so whatever, I was always like this, right? This is just who I am. It's just that there was a bit of a break, as I said. And it's good. I feel good. It feels good to be back. It feels good to be able to go back to church. It feels good to be doing things that fill my happy bucket. And giving these talks is one of those things. And it's difficult as a doctor, as you can imagine. I'm a medical doctor, and people, when it comes to mental illness, they judge everything that you've ever done and everything that you'll ever do on the disclosure of your mental illness. So, oh my gosh, you drink so much champagne. Oh yeah, get depression. Oh, whatever. Oh yeah, it's because, So I'm okay with that, because I know that ultimately the message I'm sharing is a life-saving one. I want people to understand and accept that it's okay to have a mental illness. It's okay to burn out. And it's okay to seek help, professional help, and get better, because that's exactly what happened to me. And here I am, and I've lived to tell the tale, and I hope that others can do the same. Thank you.